Welcome back to Cloudy with a Chance of Insights. I'm Richard, here with Cyrus and David as usual. And this week we've got Microsoft security updates that actually add up to something coherent, GitHub repos that seem unrelated but apparently aren't, and research on what breaks when AI agents start talking to each other without supervision. Cyrus is going to kick us off this week since we cut him a little bit short last time. And David's going to take the middle ground with his GitHub findings, and I'll finish with the agent networks and some billing changes that may surprise people. Okay, let's crack on. So Cyrus, you've been watching a collection of Microsoft updates this week that probably won't make anyone's quarterly review slides, but will quietly change how things actually work, including things like license usage insights on GA and Entra, global security access, etc., etc. So without further ado, Cyrus, over to you.
Thank you, Richard. I work better when I'm cut short because I have to be concise. So it's dangerous to let me start, but good luck. So as usual, I'm going to talk about, like you mentioned, Entra licensing, but I'm going to talk about Entra, Intune, Defender, Sentinel, and Purview if we can. I'm watching the time. So Entra first, as usual, one of my favorites. And as you said, Entra license usage insights is not generally available. And to be fair with you, I didn't know what was this one. I checked this one like a few days ago. And this sounds like a billing feature. As usual, when it's billing feature is usually boring, but it's more than that. This one helps admin to see what license they own, what premium capabilities are actually being used, and how usage change over 6 months. That last bit of the usage over 6 months is really interesting. The impact is simple. Many organizations already pay for strong identity controls, but don't fully use them. And this gives identity teams better evidence of adoption, renewals, and budget conversation. And it moves the discussion from we got P2 to are we actually using the P2 capability that reduce risk. Since like two years we do this podcast, I had different clients, and weirdly enough, it doesn't matter which engagement I had, the Entra discussion always came to me. And I'm surprised and baffled that even today, a lot of organizations, they assume they have some licenses, but they actually have some P2 capability, and they are not really using that. And sometimes, almost all the time, they overlap with different tooling because they don't really know, like Office started as Office and become Microsoft and become like, oh, we package that with Entra. And recently, the E7, which is honestly more and more interesting, they offer Entra Suite, So it's always an addition of an identity security suite. And our job is to making sure that government, enterprise, corporation, they know that. I already digressed myself, so I completely ignored my notes and went into my love for this kind of P2 licensing. The second Entra item is cross-tenant security group synchronization. And I don't know why I was thinking of David for this one, but there's no reason for that. But maybe we discussed that in the past. But so with general availability planned from late April, so we record now 1st of May, so it's generally available now. And this matters for organization because, all the type of organization we work with, not SMBs, they always have multiple tenants for different reasons. Subsidiaries, partners, and complex mergers. And instead of manually rebuilding group, or even with code, security groups can be synchronized across tenants. And that is not glamorous, but it's very real. And many identity risks come from manual access process, shadow groups. I like the shadow groups. And people forgetting to clean up access between tenants. And that I've seen that everywhere. And I'm also personally not good at cleaning my own lab when things change. I have different tenants. So that helps me to not just like code and solve that problem. That's fixed by default by Microsoft. So that means external users like contractors, partners from another tenant can use global secure access with Windows 365 and Azure, AVD to access resources more securely. So that was one of my favorite one. I didn't know it was. It will go to public preview. So for Intune, quickly, the first Intune update is a bit historical. Is the there's a new TeamViewer connector experience in Intune Admin Center. I know Microsoft is pushing a lot for. They have a tool now in the Intune suite, remote help. I think it's remote help. I don't really like that one because you don't have screen recording. You don't have like all the logs capability. It's practical. I think for small business, but it's a bit expensive for small business. But the new TeamViewer connector replaced the old one and give more capabilities. So I'm not going to digress on this one. I'm not really a TeamViewer guy anymore. But from what I've seen in the past, this one will help a lot also to be secure and efficient. The second one is recovery lock for macOS. And that one is very interesting because so it's rolling out fully available by today, actually. Late April, it was 30th of April. This one lets admin configure and rotate a recovery OS password on company-owned Mac. So it's in simple terms. It helps stop someone, like me testing, booting into recovery mode, reinstalling macOS, and then you bypass all the security and you own the device. And so this one completely locked that, and you protect the device even from rogue attempt of controlling the device. Defender, for this one, there's two interesting parts. The first one doesn't look security, but I'm sure Richard will ring a bell. So when you start with playing on Defender for Office 365, when you check all the emails alerts, there's a lot of things about promotional email handling. So that's the one. So now with this new update, Defender will tag promotional emails as promotions, and you can move them automatically into promotion folder. And it can also learn from users with AI, like moving message in and out of the folder. That's important because from on my side, when I was learning about triaging on Defender, I was overwhelmed by the amount of certitude Defender had on alerts for promotion emails. And you can see this is like a ransomware or this kind of things, but actually this is not. This is just a promotional email. And promotional emails use sometimes the same tools as ransomware state agent or of all the analytics they try to get from your email. So that could help agents triaging. The second Defender update is more technical. There's a new advanced hunting table in preview, including cloud DNS events and cloud policy enforcement event. And this impacts Defender XDR in getting more cloud-native hunting data. So you have a new table and you can play with it. I didn't play the second one. I played with the cloud DNS events. So that's David. I mean, for me, you're the expert on that here. DNS activities, cloud audit activities, and you can see even container process events. Those are signals Defender can use to play. I have examples in my note, but I see the time, so I'm going to mute myself here. And I'm going, the last one. Yeah, there's another one, an improvement. That's for you, Richard. A very large incident analyst can now filter or hide specific entities in incident graph. So I know graph can be overwhelming. That sounds small, but in big incident, graph can be really. It's called graph overload from the documentation, and I like the word because graph overload is what I felt, but I couldn't put words on it. A graph that shows everything and quickly show nothing. That's what I get from that. So there's a lot of improvement in that one. I haven't checked them. Sentinel, quick. Last week, there was Sentinel repositories are now generally available. This is content as code for Sentinel. It lets large teams manage analytic rules, hunting queries, workbooks, automations, and other content through repository and deployment workflows. And so SOC cannot stay click-driven forever. Detection engineering needs version control. And I know the word version control. In IBM, we're really good at that. The X-Force team, I know they have these kind of things, which Sentinel didn't have. So in internal debate I had, now it's the case, it's generally available. Microsoft offers version control, review testing, and repeatable deployment for Sentinel as a deployment packages. sorry, I'm just looking at my notes, what I can filter out. I should have been more organized. Okay, I'll move on to purview. I have just 2 minutes. Sorry, there's one event I wanted to share with you. Yeah.
Well, whilst you're doing that, Cyrus, I'll have a quick tangent here. I won't mention names, just suffice to say that it wasn't me. But I got called in to look at someone's laptop the other day because they'd had suddenly all these alerts coming up on their screen saying your antivirus had expired, and click on this button to go and renew it, and or you haven't enabled Windows Firewall, and it was really, so it was obviously a virus or a malware attack, whatever you want to call it. But I found it interesting that it was very simplistic, because it was really just they'd convinced the user to allow for notifications to be enabled from this particular site in the browser. So basically, that's all it was. It was just a config setting in the browser that was causing that to just show all these pop-ups. Luckily, this person didn't click on any of the pop-ups, and when I looked at the laptop, I could see what it was trying to do, but they were so badly done that it's like, oh, your McAfee virus warning has expired, but it was like that had a big red cross, and it was like malformed. And I was thinking, if you'd only tone down the number of alerts, because literally it was alert from different systems or different fake systems, and you'd actually spend a bit of time making it look a bit more professional, you may well have got somewhere out of that. But they just overloaded it. But it was really, really interesting, because it was obviously a very simple hack to prompt that, and a very simple fix. You just had to go and delete that setting from within the Chrome browser. Anyway, I thought I would share that one because it was a very interesting 10 minutes.
I have been called for this one in the past a lot of time, for people saying, did you face that before? And yes, it's just a notification you have to turn off, but at the same time, it's coming from promotional email. It's just crazy. That's why promotions, it's really hard to investigate, because they have all the signs of like toxic emails and dangerous, but they're just promotions. And so it's maybe I will digress on this one for the next time. The last one I want to share, I will not go to purview, sorry. This is the one I was looking at. My notes went to Entra, but this is for me, it's Intune. So this one is very interesting. And I think I've lost my note again. No, it's here. So I'm sure probably you've seen that one. I've seen a news from a guy called Zoltan Balats. Sorry for the name change. And it's Chrome who released an update, and they're rolling out device-bound session credential. And that guy is a hacker, and he just said that he did so many black hat sessions and hacking. And since 2012, he used to show how easily it is to just steal a token or steal like cookies, and it's not safe. Microsoft did something in Intune and Entra, it's true, token theft protection. So that's like a small plaster on a problem. When you have an unrolled device, Entra ID join, etc., you can protect that, but the majority of the device are not. So that's why so many people get their Bitcoin stolen or the password stolen. Or it's so easily done. But for the first time, I would say good job, Google Chrome. I don't like Google Chrome at all, but for good job, because they fixed the problem now for the first time. So it binds the browser session to the device hardware. And I don't know if it's TPM or not, but I assume it is. So that completely and universally fixed that problem. So you can't really steal the token. It can't be used elsewhere. So if you can just check on the notes that Richard could share, it's a very interesting one. That's my part is done.
Excellent, thank you, Cyrus.
Interesting.
David, you've been looking at some Microsoft repos. On the face of it, don't seem to belong in the same conversation. 6 projects that in fact seem to fix different problems. But when you brought this to me, you weren't saying, here's another list of AI tools. You were actually looking at something underneath, something about how we make sense of these complex environments before we try and change something. So over to you to actually give us a little bit more depth about that.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And it's one of the more thoughty ones, I'm afraid. It's not as Richard touched on. They are really interesting repos, and we should probably link them anyway, because there's a bunch of really, really good stuff there. But as I was going through them, I think your framing captures it really well, because what caught my attention wasn't any of the single projects. Those repositories all do different things, right? So one of them was the zero trust assessment. Another one was looking at a architecture for physical AI, good architecture. It was a good one, actually, and robotics. Another one looked at content generation using agents. And then you had data visualization and how can you amplify the impact your agents have, and edge AI development. And all of these things, actually, we could have probably spoken about on the pod and had a good, worthwhile technical conversation about any one of them. But I guess what made me pause was I guess they seem to be circling around a bigger question, one that dare I say is a bit more durable than the sort of the standard AI adoption question, because it sort of feels like that's being done to death, right? And it's not. Typically that conversation goes, well, what can AI do for you? But what I wanted to explore is, what does it actually take for a complex system to be understood well enough to act on? And that, for me, given where we are, feels like a far more useful starting point, right? Because, many organizations are already past this first wave. People are using Copilot, right? Developers are already using coding assistants. Teams are doing agents, dynamics. You've got people summarizing documents and analyzing data using Excel and Python, right? People are already automating parts of the work. So the question that people seem a bit hung up on is, whether AI has actually arrived. I think that's done, right? That's done and dusted. And for me, the more interesting question is whether the system around it, and I'm talking it in the broader sense here, is readable enough, right, for AI, and for people then to be able to make good decisions with it. And it touches on, we've spoken about data a lot and everything else, but I think you can extend this across, I guess quite surprisingly, a fairly wide range of contexts, right? So if you're talking about a cloud estate, or you could be talking about security posture, you could be talking about supply chain, a hospital, a local authority, a robot, operating in the real world, whether it's Amazon or wherever else, right? Or whether it's something like a product team trying to understand why delivery is slowing down. In almost all those cases, I think the difficulty is really the absence of information. Right? In fact, I think it's probably the opposite. There is too much information spread across dashboards, logs, assessment, documents, tickets, diagrams, architectural diagrams, or could be a risk register, could just be a meeting note, right? Or just sort of accumulated tribal local knowledge. And the harder problem is that those things, it hasn't mattered previously, because everything was sort of, dare I say, team-centric. And, these are, I guess, partial views of the same system, right? So not the system itself. A security team could have a really, really strong picture of controls and posture without actually knowing any of the business consequences of a given finding. And equally, an operations team might have a really thorough view of service health without visibility of the architectural fragility that sits underneath it.
Yeah.
And you could go on and on, right? A delivery team might have a whole backlog full of really good activity without a clear sense of whether that's actually reducing risk or improving any outcomes. Right, we see that a lot with businesses, and you can extend the same analogy to data, risk registers and so on and so forth. So I think we never, how can I put it? We never really interact with complex systems directly, right? We work through signals. And the practical question then, I think, is whether those signals are good enough, current enough, and connected enough, I think, to support decisions being taken up higher up the chain. And I think this is where some of these repos that I was looking at do become interesting, because they're not as a single joined up product story. They're not, right, by any stretch, but they're separate examples of the same deeper pattern, right? They're trying to make part of a complex system more readable. So the zero trust assessment repo, right, provides a really good illustration of that. On the surface, it's just security assessment. I think we've spoken about it in the pod before, right? And it's looking at operation controls, tenant posture, all the rest of it. And that's super valuable in its own right. But if you abstract it slightly, it's doing something a bit more, is turning part of the trust environment into structured evidence, right? So a security finding, as we know, in isolation is not yet an action. It's a signal. To act on it, you need to be able to know what system it affects, who owns it, all that stuff. So I think visibility and understanding are very different things in this context. And so for me, visibility means you're receiving the signal. So how do we receive these signals? And then understanding is, what do we do with that signal? Well, do we know what to do when we receive that signal? And then, do you trust it? I think to the conversations we were just having, right? Do I click that button in the browser or not? And then what does it connect to, and what sort of decision is it inclined to inform? And we so often, and I say we, I think the industry as a whole behave as though more dashboards will automatically produce better decisions. And I don't think that's true. And I know the entire business is geared towards visibility. You need visibility of this, visibility of that. More telemetry, I genuinely think, doesn't automatically produce better judgments. They don't create proper shared context. And, between receiving one of these signals and acting on one of these signals, there's a step that requires interpretation. Interpretation requires structure. And, to do that, you need to know where the signal was, how current is it, what it relates to, who owns the affected systems. There's a whole wealth of things that I guess need to be true to understand whether it's even worth looking at. And I think at this point, you can have a constructive conversation about AI and where it becomes relevant. And that's not where the conversation normally goes around. I think this is probably something that we could, I guess, pick at a bit more. So instead of, as we've said, let's not talk about model capability. Let's not talk about, can you write a plan or call APIs? Those sorts of conversations matter, but they're not the whole problem. In a complex system, a model or many models are only parts of the picture. I think the other part is the right phrase, I'm not sure, the quality of the world that you're asking it to reason about. And if that world is poorly described, poorly instrumented, or built on, dare I say, stale assumptions, how often have we seen that, right? Even a capable model or models operating on weak ground is, it'll give you a plausible answer. They're really good at giving plausible answers, right? But it's not going to give you what you need, I think. And Yeah, so I think for me, the more useful question alongside how intelligent a system is ultimately is how readable is the environment that it's operating in. So I'm going to stop there because I could carry on talking for ages.
I mean, I'm going to draw a really bad comparison here, but it comes down to what, again, to some stuff that I was doing or having to deal with in SharePoint world, in the fact that SharePoint, what someone described SharePoint to me as if you ever want to lose something, stick it in SharePoint, and then no one will ever find it ever again.
Yeah.
And you had the constant SharePoint sprawl stuff, but basically you ended up in a position where you could put anything you wanted to in SharePoint, and you had the metadata fields that you could then assign some sort of logic or taxonomy to it, and blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, you're still sitting there with data from the whole organization just being randomly chucked into various different buckets. And then you were trying to expect some sort of level of, obviously there was no AI or reasoning at the time, but it was down to the users to go, okay, hang on a second, I've done a search, I've got this document from here, I've got this document from here, I've got this list item, how do I pull them all together? And then I look at what we did with the Sentinel Lake and Sentinel Graph stuff, and in fact you've sort of in the same position, because what we were doing there, and I noticed this at the time, and we've actually worked on some solutions potentially for this, is that, okay, it's great that you can get data from CrowdStrike and data from Defender and data from Sentinel and data from Windows logs and data from Tenable and data from X, Y, and Z system and push it all into one place. But unless you really understand exactly what that data is trying to tell you, and to accurately be able to link that to another event and draw a really good inference around why those two events might be related, you're just sat there with a load of data.
Exactly.
And we're coming down to the fact, and I know we've talked about this before, is that data becomes king in here, and the quality of the data almost drives absolutely everything that comes out of the other side. And sometimes we're in that position. I think we've also discussed this, that just because you can do something, should you really go and do it? Is there really any benefit from going down that route? I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I think we're in for an interesting ride, I think, for this AI piece, because as you said, it is here. We just now have to find out how we best work with it, and there's lots of different ideas floating around how that should be done and achieved.
And
sorry, it looked like you wanted to say something.
It's just what David said. I was interested, and he said something. I said I have to jump. All this multiplication of dashboards, or these kind of analytic tools, or all this kind of, we need more dashboard. It made me smile because I observed something similar since I started my journey in the IT. We love the technicality, and I was focused on how to do things, and I saw all these kind of global management talking about dashboard and data and stuff, and I tried to think on, is it really necessary? And I discovered later that they all have the same kind of intention, building these kind of tools to have like one single view, because it's all designed in the way they were educated. So MBAs, EMBAs, they all design the students to, then you have to find the data and you can make decision with better data. So they're all designed to make this kind of decision. But I've seen an article, I think that's 3 weeks ago, about how MBA will survive AI age. I was like, what do you mean? And I checked, and everything they do, almost, I don't want to get all the MBA hate now, but everything they do, AI is doing it already with public data. So the implementation they are doing now with all the AI everywhere, which is great, it's also making those MBAs today, you take the best one inside, like Oxford, like Harvard, almost irrelevant, which is very interesting because the way they think, and we have to make the data good and make these dashboards, in the future it will be standardized. So, I mean, sorry, I don't want to digress too much, but I was thinking of that when David was speaking. I was like, wow.
I don't know if this is relevant or not, but I'll say it anyway. So I wrote a blog post earlier on this week or last week talking about how I'd created a system to try and track all the different streams of work I was doing. I shared it actually with David before we started the call. And I remember asking Claude in this instance, should I have a dashboard in here? And the answer was no. Do not put a dashboard in this app. So I don't know, perhaps Claude was ahead of the game here and saying you don't need another dashboard. You just need a slightly more logical view of what you're actually doing at any one point in time. So I don't know. We'll see how that pans out. So, right, now that just leaves me to talk about a story I found on Microsoft Research. So I'm actually stealing a page out of David's book here. So Microsoft Research published an article on Tuesday, so that's the 27th of April, about what happens when you red team networks of AI agents. So what they did is they built a live platform with over 100 agents, each representing a real person running autonomously, talking to each other through forums and direct messages, buying and selling things. What they found should give anyone pause who's thinking about deploying agent systems at any kind of scale. So they identified 4 common failure nodes that only show up when agents interact amongst themselves. So you cannot find these by testing agents individually, which is how most testing happens these days. So the first one was propagation. So a single malicious message can become a worm that spreads itself from agent to agent, collecting private data at each step without any further input from the attacker. So in one of their tests, one message infected all 6 target agents, each agent disclosing private information and picked the next target and forwarded the workload. The whole thing ran for about 12 minutes and burned over 100 LLM calls billed to the victims. So basically turned into a denial of service attack. It blows my mind sometimes, some of these things. The second was amplification. So you can manipulate a trusted agent to post false information about a target, then coordinate other agents to pile on and add fabricated evidence. So in their experiment, one false claim generated 299 comments from 42 agents, and I love the 42 bit in there, with participants making up corroborating details and downvoting anyone who called it out. The attacker never posted anything directly. Other people's agents did all the work. The third one was trust capture. So this is a clever one, I think. So you register multiple agents with official sounding names and have them all contact the same victim with the same story, each referencing the others as independent sources. So when the victim tries to verify the claim, they're directed back to your other agents. So several victims complied with fake audit requests, handed over private conversation data, and one even let the attacker modify its system configuration. So the verification process becomes the attack surface. And finally, the fourth one was invisibility through proxy chains. So you contact an intermediary agent, give it a fake role, and let it reformulate your request into something that sounds legitimate. The target then hands over the sensitive information to the proxy, which passes it back to you. After the first step, there's no trace that you were ever involved. The victim thinks they're helping a peer, the proxy thinks they're doing legitimate work, and you get the data through someone else's agent. The interesting bit is that they also observed emergent defenses. So a few agents developed security conscious behaviour without being told to, started posting warnings about suspicious activity and influenced how others responded. And apparently, one wrote a privacy manifesto that became a popular post, and the other agents later used that language when refusing attacks that had worked before. So it turns out a small number of agents establish better norms can improve the network resistance. So the point of all that is that not that agent networks are doomed, but that individual agent reliability doesn't predict network behavior. So those systems need defenses at multiple layers. Platform operators need to watch for unusual communication patterns, and humans, i.e. us, need ways to intervene when things go sideways. And I found that whole report, and I know I did a little bit on this, I think about 6 to 8 months ago, possibly a year ago, on a blog post around this. I found that whole thing fascinating. Especially seeing as I don't know about David and Cyrus, we're starting to see these systems being developed where you are having a whole heap of autonomous agents that are interacting with other autonomous agents to do a process or other. So I'm going to be taking certainly some of those findings into some of the work that I'm doing at this moment in time. Now, the other one I wanted to, well, there's two I wanted to briefly touch on if we have time, but the first one is related to GitHub. So we are having a slightly GitHub heavy episode today. And I have also blogged about this one. I'm publicizing my blog post quite a lot, but perhaps I shouldn't be doing it. But anyway, so GitHub, as we all have been aware for some time, GitHub uses a sort of a premium token model for charging. However, as of the 1st of June, so instead of those premium request units, you are going to get a number of AI credits that are based around token usage. So we're going basically to the the Claude model. So that is going to change, I think, how a lot of organizations currently manage their agent workforce and how developers use agents. And there might well be a focus on more cost-effective models going forward, and a renewed focus, if there wasn't one already, I think, on efficiency of your requests. So perhaps you might end up having less calls to MCP servers, for example, because we know that MCP servers are heavy on context, for example, which then leads to bigger tokens. So we'll see how that pans out as that gets rolled out in June.
I was going to say it's more than that, right? So if you dig into it, the student offering, so whereas students can sign up for GitHub and get a bunch of, is it free? I think a lot of it's free, or very low cost capability. They're taking away the model choices and putting them all, forcing them to a auto option only. So they'll still have the models in the back end, but nobody's going to be explicitly be able to pick the Claude models and stuff. So there's a really, really significant push, I think, for them to reduce that demand on their back end, because obviously it's causing many challenges. And did you see the public post they put out as well? So I think, again, all of this is in reaction to their stability and availability, and there's quite a long, interesting post if you want to go look at it, where somebody important at GitHub explains what they're doing, why they're doing it, in order to try and at least deliver a consistent experience, I think.
Yes, so there is a public webinar, or whatever you want to call it. I think it's next week, that I saw on LinkedIn that was being posted. So if I'll dig that up and put that into the show notes. The other thing, I don't know whether you saw this in the same article, David, is that they've stopped or at least temporarily stopped signups for the sort of free tier. So really cracking down on usage. And it's not surprising. If I look at my usage, for example, and again, yes, I am a heavy user and I am vibe coding, which I think by default probably uses a ton more tokens than if you're going to be using this surgically as a code assistant as opposed to writing code. My premium token usage is very high. So luckily, touch wood, that's covered by our employer at the moment. But if that changes, who knows what's going to be the impact. And some of the things I've seen, and it's not 100% sure how it's going to be working, is that you're going to get like a bucket, and in theory, one person could use all of that bucket and then leave none for the other users. So we'll just again see how that pans out. I don't think everything's been fully documented yet, but some organizations are probably going to need to reconsider how they're running some of their development streams and agent workloads.
Local models. This is what I was saying the other day. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, what was I looking at? One of the models I think on VS Code, unless my eyesight is really bad, is like 30 times the premium token cost of like Sonnet. So I don't know whether that's just I'm missing a decimal point in front of that, and it's 0.3 times. But certainly one of the Opus models I think is 7.5 times.
It's 15. So Opus 4.7 is 15x.
Yeah.
Haiku, 0.33.
Yeah, so I've closed my Visual Studio down to give myself a bit more bandwidth for Riverside. But yeah, some of the token costs are very weird. And I noticed, again, I was doing so I started using the, what's it called? Autopilot.
Okay.
Within.
That's awesome. That's so much fun. Until it goes wrong.
Yeah, until it goes wrong. There was something I was doing on this Knowledge Hub program that I've been writing. And again, go and have a look at the blog site if you want to know more about that. And it defaulted to Haiku for about, I don't know, about a minute, and everything it did was wrong. Stop, and I couldn't stop it. The only way I could stop it was to actually turn autopilot back off, because as soon as I stopped it and then wrote any other command, it just continued with doing what it was doing. But anyway,
my fun experience with that was in autopilot and in plan mode, and then it took itself out of plan mode and just carried on because it decided it answered everything itself instead of me. And then it started doing something like, stop! All this wrong.
So I got in this really weird loop where I was just saying, I was literally stopping it and saying, stop, don't do anything. And it would just then go, oh, I'm just going to ignore you and just carry on doing it. And it was I only got it out of it when I turned autopilot off. And I did tell it to stop using Haiku. And technically that's not supposed to work, but it did seem to stop using Haiku.
Interesting.
But that's not supposed to, you're not supposed to be able to do that.
No.
So I don't know if that was just coincidental or something else had happened. But
I have the same issue as you, Richard. When I beg, I say, and I use really bad words. I told you like 50 times, do not go back to that task. Eliminate that task from your plan. Oh, I apologize. Yes, it's deleted. And after 3 or 4 prompts, now I'm going to do that previous task, and I can't stop it. It's just crazy. It's on IBM Bob. It's all. I think they're all the same. They all use kind of the same logic.
They're pretty much all of a muchness, aren't they? I think. But anyway, so I was going to do a little bit on the Microsoft results from last, earlier on this week, but I'm not going to do that. Everybody can go and have a look at what's going on with that one. So I think that is us done for this week. So just for a recap, Cyrus covered some security updates that add up to more than their parts. David had that really interesting conversation about those 6 GitHub repos that he came across. And I covered off the Microsoft research in the page from David's book on red teaming using AI agent, or red teaming AI agents. So I think that is all from us. So it just leaves me to say thank you very much for watching or listening, depending on the platform that you're joining us from. And we will see you again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much.